Welcome to the first Volpe Creates show. I am your host, Chris Volpe. My cat down in a second because she can't give me a minute. And this is going to be, presumably, a weekly... Sorry, she's knocking my stuff around. A weekly show talking about video games, game development, and the games industry. I am joined this week by a special guest for the first ever show, Ross Hersemann. A good friend of mine, an old friend of mine, partner in many ways, future father of my children. So Ross, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure when we can start gabbing about the game industry. And, today I think we're going to be talking about some of the latest hot topics. This should be fun.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about this week, which is kind of the reason I decided to start it. So this has been an idea that I've had for a few years, that we were actually in the process of getting going at our office, and then COVID hit. And so we ended up, closing down the office, which meant our studio idea that we were thinking about getting going kind of stopped. And then I ended up moving to a different house. Oh, there we go. Pumpkin. That's exactly what I didn't want to happen. Give me a second. Oh, my Lord. All right. We are going to pause this. I'm going to take her and put her in a room.
Oh, when they opened Disneyland in 1956, nothing worked. But thankfully, the Pirates of the Caribbean don't eat the tourists. While Chris is away, I'll just give a brief introduction of myself to catch some new folks to the channel up. My name is Ross Hersemann. I run Loading Law, which is a video game law practice out of Chicago, and I also teach several courses at DePaul University on video game law. So I think the idea of today is for us to talk about some Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft news, how that's going to affect everyone in this industry, whether they're at the AAA level, AA level, or all of our indies. So we're eager to hear some of your questions, and Chris and I will be talking about, kind of our hot takes on this, off the cuff, first impressions.
Yes. We are also joined by Baby. She's right here. She is being a good girl. She's not knocking over my lighting system. So that's good. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to start this as just a kind of weekly conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I own a video game studio here in beautiful Columbus, Ohio, frigid Columbus, Ohio. I don't know what Chicago is. Chicago cold right now?
It was always cold.
And so I also help run the game dev community here. It's one of the largest tech meetup groups in Ohio. I'm also the founder of GDEX, which is, to my knowledge, the largest video gaming expo of its kind in the Midwest. Started that 10 years ago. And I am a teacher. So I teach at 2 universities right now, a bunch of game design courses. And a large part of what I do in the courses is bring up things from the industry to talk about. So I thought it would be cool to do a show where I can, bring my friends along, chat about just things that are interesting to them, and then maybe pull something from the industry, or we just talk about games or whatever. This week happened to be a big week. So before we get into that, though, let's just sort of chat, you and I, Ross. You're a lawyer, you're a law talking guy with a specialization in games and creative media. Would that be a fair thing to say? What brought you
fair.
into what brought you into video game law of all things?
I think when I first got into it, I was really passionate about helping creators protect kind of the fruits of their labors, what they put together. I think too often lawyers get a bad rap as ambulance chasers, or as folks who are trying to stifle creativity or limit industries or be focused on profit. And for me, I very much got into this to kind of buck that trend and say I am enthusiastically supporting people who make new creative content and want to make sure that they can protect that through a variety of legal institutions, but also so that they can continue making cool things that I enjoy playing just like everyone else.
Nice. So we got connected at GDEX many moons ago, and I feel grateful that we've been able to sort of build a friendship and a relationship and kind of help move the Midwest into this industry. Because I know it's there's a lot of passion here, a lot of talent, a lot of dedication, but maybe the resources aren't there as big. Even in a place like Chicago, I mean, Illinois has a couple big studios, but I know that there's still we're all sort of facing the same hurdles in a lot of ways. So, what kind of, let's say, in the past couple of years, if you want to talk about COVID, we can, or just in general. But what are some of these like hurdles that you've seen, and how are folks sort of overcoming them?
Oh, that's a mouthful. I think you're absolutely right that Chicago has a very long history with game development, and we do have some large tentpole studios at the AA and AAA levels here. But I think what kind of distinguishes Chicago from some other cities in the Midwest, and something that it has in common with Columbus, is this very active community of independent developers, of very passionate folks who want to make stuff themselves, put it out there, and kind of lead their own band and also be first chair of their own bands. That's one of the things that I've always been passionate about gaming in the Midwest is, if Chicago is the city that works, we are also the city that games and works hard. One of the difficulties that we've been experiencing in the last couple of years, just with COVID in general, is what I'm sure most communities are having difficulty with, and that's how do you combat fatigue and burnout, and how do you keep people engaged and wanting to join yet still another Zoom call, yet still another virtual meetup when we'd all much rather be out in person making connections the good old fashioned way. And, it's one of those things where I think maybe in Chicago we have a running start. We're used to it being cold in the wintertime, and we're used to, using technology to try and bridge that gap. So I think our biggest difficulty has just been trying to be firing on all cylinders, trying to continue to make great content, and trying to maintain some level of work-life balance where we can still make cool stuff, but also enjoy what we make and not get too preoccupied with the creation of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of cool things that are happening in the Midwest and in the industry in general. But we are, and this is something I relay to our students, we're such a fast moving industry, right? Like it's by the time think about it, like when we were growing up, there weren't really game design programs, right? And now there's 4-year degree programs, but even the difference between starting, and then graduating 4 years later, the industry could be significantly different. And that, I mean, that's just the tech end. That's not even considering the law implications of it. Um, so we're a wild and woolly industry, which I think is really cool, but it also means we sort of have to be on our toes. So, uh, are you working on anything interesting right now that you're allowed to share that you're jazzed about? Because I mean, you do a lot of community stuff too, and
I do. So, in addition to my law practice and my teaching, I'm also very active with the International Game Developers Association, and I chair the Chicago chapter here. And some things that I'm really excited to see is how you can't keep a good dev down, right? So, even despite the state of the world, whether it's politics or culture, uh, my clients and my colleagues and my friends here in Chicago are making some really cool stuff. So, I've been seeing some really neat things in development for things like Global Game Jam. uh, lots of really passionate students putting together the newest, coolest things. And one of the things that continues to excite me is that there's really no technological limitations placing any barriers on my students' imagination right now or my clients' imagination right now. Whatever they conceive of, uh, things like Unity and Unreal are giving them the tools to build that stuff in real time. So they can take it from conception of, whoa, I've got a cool idea to make this amazing platformer with parallax scrolling and classic 2D retro art. And 3 weeks later, they've got a working prototype or vertical slice for it. So it's really encouraging to see that everybody's ready to make stuff. No one's slowing down here.
yeah, the democratization, if you want to call it that, of technology, particularly in the game space. I mean, it's huge. Just in the past decade, it's fundamentally changed the way games are made. Obviously, the App Store has provided sort of an on-ramp of opportunity for folks in amazing ways. And obviously, what was things like Flappy Bird, where just some dude makes a game and ends up blowing up. But um, just getting your hands on the tools. When we started Multivarious, we were having conversations early on about using a couple different engines, and just to license them was several $100,000. And I'm like, I can't pay 200. I think the Cry engine back when that was a heavy hitter. Yeah, we were talking. It was about 200 or $250,000 to license the Cry engine, and we're like, we can't afford that. Even Unreal back before they became the sort of open engine that they're trying to be now, which is in I was going to say in no small part, but no, it's a direct response to Unity. Uh, that would cost several $100,000, and so just being able to download something for free and go and make use of it is, I mean, it's amazing. It's outstanding. Um, so I think, yes, seeing all these new ideas come to fruition in the indie space. What's the indie community looking like in Chicago lately?
Booming as always. We've got some amazing coders and designers coming out of DePaul, some fantastic artists coming out of Columbia, and with these game design programs, game art programs that we have from our local colleges, folks are putting together some amazing things, and I think are drawing a lot of inspiration from some Chicago success stories of local indie studios that really went big and made the big time. The Young Horses are local here in Chicago, former DePaul students, most of them, and from their successes in Octodad have now gone forward to make uh, Bug Snacks, which has
Bug
been one of
snacks.
the best-selling games on the PS5. And I know it's one of the questions my students are always asking me is, how did the Young Horses do it? Do you know them? How can you put me in touch with them? And they're very inspired to continue to make things like that. And when it comes to what they've been doing lately and what kind of community they've been establishing, we have a local Discord meetup called Indie City Games, where every 2 months or so, our local community will get together virtually via Discord and showcase their latest, things in development, whether it's a recent capstone game or game jam project. But it's really encouraging to see a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old, very passionate students, putting together their first Unity game and showing it to a group, a virtual room of people where some of the senior folks in the room, some of the gray hairs, are former designers from Midway or, came from EA's office or currently are at NetherRealm, Iron Galaxy, Phosphor, or Wargaming, some of the heavy hitters. So when it comes to mentorship, it's just really encouraging to see the old guard talking about what it was like designing arcade games and passing that time-tested knowledge on to a next generation of indie devs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're not part of the gray hairs yet. I don't think.
We're on
But
our way. We might be no hairs, we might be the half gray hairs, but we're getting there.
yeah, we're getting there. All right. Well, I think it might be time to move on to the big news. You ready? You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So this week, in a sort of surprise breaking news bombshell, Microsoft announced that they're buying Activision Blizzard. So this is all the news articles have stated that Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard. I think we all know here in America land, big industry acquisitions like this are probably going to have to get approved, go through the SEC and a few other things. But let's just assume, for the sake of the story, that it's all done. The government's going to approve it. That's a big fucking deal, man. Like, this is a big deal. Uh, we've had a couple acquisitions over the past few years, Bethesda by Microsoft being one of note.
Mhm.
And that was a big deal. But Bethesda's no Activision Blizzard. No offense to Bethesda. They're just not in the sort of same league. I forget, the Bethesda purchase was what, about 9 billion, I think, 8 or 9 billion. And this is almost 70 billion. So 68.7 to be exact, if I
Mhm.
recall correctly. Uh,
You got it.
so this is a big move. So I'm going to start out with, well, before I ask my big question, what's your sort of just gut reaction when you heard? Were you surprised by this news? Like,
I wasn't surprised. My gut check is always, in chaos there is opportunity, and being the closet optimist that I am, I saw this news and thought this could solve a lot of problems. It could create a lot of new ones. But I think that ultimately this is going to shake out as a good thing. This is one of the largest buyouts, one of the largest acquisitions, one of the biggest deals the game industry has ever seen. $68.7 billion is a huge amount of money for a gargantuan amount of IP. These are some of the biggest titles in the game industry. We're talking about Diablo and Overwatch, and Call of Duty, and StarCraft and World of Warcraft. These are some of the biggest games ever. And, this is going to have far-reaching implications. But for me, I was kind of excited because I thought, well, this is going to strengthen Microsoft's brand. This is going to, elevate their already paramount status in the game industry. But in terms of not only the content that gets put out for gamers and for the treatment of workers involved, I see more opportunities than red flags here. So this is something that I'm excited about.
Okay. So just for context, 68.7 billion is a lot of money, right? But that ended up putting the price per share at about $95 per share. Now, at the time before the purchase was announced, the share price was about 65. So Microsoft, they put in a heavier bid over the current trading value of Activision. So they wanted this thing. They were willing to go above. And then as soon as that announcement happened, we saw a pretty consistent trend line in the video game space of video game stocks just shooting up. So Activision Blizzard is currently trading at 81. So they shot up from 65 to 81. I checked these this morning. Nintendo shot up a little bit, but they 58 to about 59. So they're roughly where they were. EA shot up or went from 130 to 139, and this is like these are the numbers I'm giving you. These are all like overnight numbers, right? This is ending one day, starting the next day. Sony, however, went from 124
Took a hit, right?
to 110. That's a pretty sizable drop. Most large companies like this, even as crazy as the stock market is right now, most large companies don't take that kind of drop overnight, generally. So, what are your thoughts on that? My question, I guess, my bring out the big guns is Sony going to have to respond to this? Like they let Bethesda go by, and they didn't do anything. Sony bought what? They bought Housemarque recently, Bluepoint recently. I think they bought a third studio, and I'm totally blanking on it. But Housemarque's a great studio, don't get me wrong, but they've been making pretty much Sony games for, I don't know, the past 15 years. They make awesome games. And then Bluepoint has been a conversion studio, a porting house, generally. And for those who may not be aware, the Uncharted collection they did, and then the most recent thing would be the Demon Souls remake for PlayStation 5 is what Bluepoint, and it's a great port, a great conversion. But neither of those studios are they're not Bethesda and they're not Activision Blizzard. Can Sony let this stand, man? Are we about to see an arms race in the industry?
I think Sony's going to bounce. I think something you touched on already is how fast this news is coming out and how quickly all of this is developing. And I think that initially when the sale was announced, there was going to be some concern that this is a move and a buy for exclusivity, that we're moving towards console exclusives and that some of these games are going to be pulled from Sony platforms to become exclusive Game Pass options or exclusive Microsoft options, notably Call of Duty. There are it's a very strong fan base of Call of Duty fans who prefer to play on their PlayStations. And I think this news for them was a gut check where they might be worried, oh no, my favorite game is going to another platform. And
yeah, we
maybe
should
some
mention,
of the...
We should mention too that Call of Duty over the past, 8 years has had a marketing relationship with PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had content first on PlayStation, and whenever you see like a Call of Duty ad, it's like best on PlayStation or whatever. So that's an ongoing relationship that already exists.
Right. So that I think that was a concern for a lot of people. But in just a couple days since this news has been announced, we've already seen some traction and some tweets from Phil Spencer saying he's been in contact with Sony and that those games will continue to be on Sony platforms. I don't think we're moving necessarily towards an arms race because I don't think this is going to be a replication of the early 90s bid wars. I don't think this is going to be Sega versus Nintendo, SNES versus Genesis, I think it's more Microsoft is moving in a direction of being a platform. I think Games Pass is going to be another online marketplace in the same way that Valve and Steam are. So I think, based on the articles I've been reading and some of the interviews that have been out there, I'm not seeing as much chatter from the sources about exclusivity, just because Microsoft is now and Xbox is now owning some of the IP of Activision Blizzard doesn't necessarily mean, at this time at least from what I've read, that any of those titles are going Xbox exclusive. Microsoft seems to be very much in favor of open platform, and I mean, look at their biggest franchise, Halo Infinite, is now available on both Steam and Game Pass. So maybe this is just going to be a kind of shifting of the way that people buy games and play games.
Yeah, I am not as optimistic as you are, I don't think. I'm not a doomsayer, but I don't think the worry about, something big happens and everybody's always like, oh, what about the Call of Duty? What about the Diablo or whatever? Those aren't the games. Microsoft is not stupid. Phil Spencer is not a stupid man. He knows what he's doing. If they can make more money by selling on a PlayStation system, they're going to do that. Particularly since, at least right now, the PS4 and PS5 are outselling the Xbox consoles by a pretty sizable margin, even with the console shortages and stuff. So it doesn't make any sense if your install base is lower to not put a game like Call of Duty, which is generally always in the like top three, if not top, five best-selling games in the world every year. So of course you're going to do that. I don't think it's the Call of Duties. I think it's the smaller things. So looking at, if history is a predictor, looking at like Bethesda, right? One of the games that they announced that is going to be an exclusive is Outer Worlds, which was a multi-platform game when it came out, and also one of my favorite games of when it came out. So this exclusivity breaks my heart a little bit. But I think we're going to see more of those smaller titles become exclusive. And you mentioned seeing games on Steam, which is something that, hey, sweetie, you want to rotate? Which is something that I think has become the norm, where it used to be exclusive meant exclusive to this platform. That's what it meant. And sometimes Microsoft would use like timed exclusives as like, they'd say exclusive, but they meant timed exclusive or whatever. But nowadays, PC isn't really a part of the exclusive, in general, conversation. So if you say something is going to be like a console exclusive, it's more than likely going to come out on PC, particularly on the Xbox side, because Microsoft owns Windows, so it behooves them to allow that. And then, of course, Game Pass. I want to talk about Game Pass a little bit, but we'll pin that for a second. And then we saw in the past couple of years, Sony has been putting stuff onto PC. So we've seen like Death Stranding, Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War. So those games are coming out on PC. I don't think that stuff's going to change. I think Microsoft is definitely going to keep doing what they're going to do. They're definitely going to build on Games Pass. But what about all these smaller games? And back to my sort of original question, I'm just, if I was sitting in a boardroom with Sony, I'd be very curious what they're talking about, because at some point you can't let your competitor control your destiny, right? There's a big difference between Activision Blizzard or EA or Ubisoft or one of these larger players being a third party where their incentives are aligned to put things on both consoles. Like Activision Blizzard makes money by putting things on both consoles. Now Activision Blizzard's incentives are not aligned in that way. And it's totally possible, if Microsoft wanted to, they could totally just pull the rug out from Sony. So I would feel like, from PlayStation's perspective, they've got to feel like they're losing a little bit of their control of their own destiny on some of these huge acquisitions. Do you think I'm off base on here? Am I being a little too hyperbolic?
No, I don't think you're being hyperbolic. I think you're making a good point. And I think that, in this industry, you can either be innovating or you can be imitating, right? So it's one of those things where whatever camp you're with, and we can't leave out Nintendo in this conversation either, because they're another major tentpole. is all of them have kind of found their niche with each generation of consoles. So Nintendo has always commanded a very strong fan base amongst its diehards. They've always been better with mobile, with the Switch and Game Boy lines being mobile, and they just have a different kind of content. There's a different type of gamer who plays Nintendo things, and there's a different kind of expectation with it. Same with Sony, same with Microsoft. I think Microsoft has always been very good at innovating online experiences. So whether it was bringing the Xbox Live to the Xbox 360 and original Xbox and really perfecting that as a pay-to-play platform, that's been something they've really excelled at. In the PS4 generation, Sony really excelled at getting exclusives. Games like Death Stranding and Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, that were only available on that platform, really created a lot of bang of buck for that system. So I'm
Spider-Man.
certainly not going to Spider-Man as well. And I think that that's been something they've been very good at. And I am not counting Sony out. I don't know necessarily if this is going just to start a bidding war or a buying war where all of a sudden these major platforms and these major studios are buying up every little studio they can find to try and build their war chest. But I am excited to see what Sony comes up with in response to this. Not necessarily a challenge, but a new innovation. I'm always excited to see things like this happen because it is ultimately, I think, going to be better for gamers. With regard to smaller studios, I think this is a great opportunity for them to be on multiple platforms. When it comes to Game Pass, making the decision to go on Game Pass might fund development or might be yet still another avenue for being multi-platform. Games that have started somewhere else might find a new home in that place. And it could potentially be very lucrative for some indies that I've talked to, or at least my clients.
Totally. Yeah, I think let's talk about Game Pass for a second because I think well, let's set the stage. So over the past 10 years, I don't think it's unfair to say that Microsoft has been struggling to exert itself in the market. The PS4 just, I mean, straight up outsold it. Like, no questions asked. Even the PS3, a lot of people consider that the Xbox 360 PS3 generation, that Microsoft was the winner of that generation. And I think you can make some claims for that. But if you just look at raw sales numbers, the PS3 outsold the 360. So then you move into the PS4 where it outsold the Xbox One dramatically. And now we're in the PS5 where it's continuing that trend, but I mean we're 14 months into the new generation, so it's way too early to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in that kind of position, you got to be, like you said, you got to be innovative. You got to think about how you can offer value to your customers, which is, for all its faults in capitalism, that's one of the things the free market is good at. And so we ended up getting a Games Pass where Microsoft realized that they're probably, at least in the short term, they're not going to win the install base war. So maybe they can win the value war and the games play anywhere you want kind of thing. That was their tactic, which I think was a great move because it made Sony seem kind of stodgy. And Microsoft's like, we're going to let you play the games you want where you want them. I was like, cool. And the rumor is that this has probably lit a fire up under Sony that they're creating a Games Pass. There was just an article last week about how Sony is looking to create a Games Pass equivalent, some sort of competitor. Because the PlayStation Plus system is cool. And for a while, man, Sony was giving me great games every month through PlayStation Plus. It's been a little iffy, I don't know, past 6 months or so, but it's still a good value. But it's not Games Pass value. Mm-hmm. So I guess the first thing I'd be curious in your thought is just how do we think Sony can respond to something like Games Pass? And then I do want to talk about the movement in the direction, not just in video games, but everything, music, movies, television, where you don't own anything. It's all subscription, right? It's content as a subscription. So I'd be curious your thoughts on those two things.
Well, I think that consumers, especially casual consumers and gamers, are going to go with the games are. I think that titles always drive hardware sales. So when it was the early 90s, and if you wanted to play Sonic, you had to buy a Sega. If you wanted Mario, you had to buy Nintendo. And that's how it was for a long time. But I think we're seeing a lot of crossover for titles and a distancing of exclusivity. So I think people are going to go where the games are, but they're also going to go where the value is. If you're a parent buying a console for your kid, you can say, I'm going to buy you a $299 Xbox Series S and a year subscription to Game Pass. and that's it. You're going to have access to all the games on that platform for a whole year. Don't ask me for another game until your next birthday. And that's going to provide a lot more value to that kid than giving them a PS4 or an equivalent PS5 with a $60 title or
Sure.
three $15 titles.
Yeah,
So for that market, that might be a good way to go.
you can't argue against the value of Game Pass. I think it's one of those, like, you talk about innovation, if you want to call it innovation. I mean, it's really like a sort of sales funnel, but
Mhm.
it was a huge jump in value. I mean, the price point that they set was super reasonable, and the amount of content you get for that price point is it's phenomenal. It's a great service.
It's a great price point, and what I love about it is because you're not buying individual titles. I mean, you remember we used to look in game magazines to figure out what were the good games to buy and what games ran and what we should get for that one game a year at Christmas or a birthday. And now with a model like Games Pass, which has so many things in common with the former GameFly or even Sega Channel in the early 90s, you're finding new experiences, games you didn't think that you would play, things that you wouldn't know that you would like, just because it's there and because it's quote unquote free as part of your establishment. So I think in that way, it's going to be great for indies, for unknowns, for games that maybe don't have the curb appeal of a tried and true $1 billion franchise. You might be more willing to play some hidden gem if it didn't, quote unquote, cost you anything if it's included with your service. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sony is going to respond with something similar, a similar platform or a similar subscription.
I like that hidden gem idea because a lot of people don't think about it anymore, but that was one of the big benefits of cable is cable
Mhm.
bundling. You would get channels bundled in that you would never pay for probably individually, right? And that
Mhm.
allowed smaller channels like Comedy Central, FX, Lifetime, if you want to call that, those sort of channels were able to get a foothold and get an audience because they were a part of a bundled package through the cable system. Now, obviously, we think about streaming and stuff more today's, but the idea remains the same. That if these small experiences or indie experiences, however you want to say them, are available, and someone's like, "Oh man, you should totally try out, X game." Like I've got a whole host of small games. I have Game Club, which we do a new game every week. It's like a book club for video games. If
Mhm.
anyone's interested in that, we have a Facebook group, and then we also have. If you go to volpecreates.com/discord, you can join our Discord channel. So we're sort of getting that ramped up. But those smaller games, if they're easily accessible, if they're available, and like you said, if they're free, um, that adds a lot of value. I can't tell you how many games that I've at least checked out because they were just free drops on the PlayStation Plus. You know.
Mhm.
So what about all these service as a subscription, content as a subscription? We don't own anything anymore, right? It's the way the industry seems to be going, but um, is there anything we can do about it? Is there anything worth doing about it? Did we
It's
lose the battle?
Oh, I think the battle continues. I think it just changes. You know me. I'm a diehard collector when it comes to my classic games, and I still love my cartridges. I still love my discs. I'm the last one holding out and buying physical copies of things.
I still buy
But
physical.
everything does seem to be moving digital. It's just getting easier, for practical reasons. I currently don't have either of the next gen consoles because I keep holding out for the disc version, which is never in stock. I see Xbox Series S's constantly, but I always hold off because I always want the ability to have that backwards compatibility with my old discs. Um, I think it's shifting, but we're not alone, Chris. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who still love physical media, and when you see the kind of work that Limited Run Games is doing by putting out physical copies of things, so that there is a collector's market for discs and cartridges with current gen games, I don't think it's going away. I think that that's going to be there, but it might just be the new niche of people who love buying vinyl or people who love collecting their Funko Pops. That just might be a new shift.
Yeah, I've definitely moved towards, I guess, digital content. I got a PS5. I bought an extra terabyte SSD drive to put in there to hold more stuff. But I still do, if it's a game I either love or I think I'm going to groove on, I kind of tend to buy like the steel books for it.
Hmm.
And part of that is that if I can get the developers to come out to GDEX, I get them to sign it. So like I've got signatures for like Borderlands 3 and other stuff where I get the devs to come out and sign it. So that's one of the, like my I guess my little perks of running my own video game expos. I get to get cool people to come out and get them to sign my stuff. Uh, but I've definitely moved more into the digital space, where there's just some games that I'm just like, I don't want to get up off the couch to switch a disc out. I'll just buy it digitally. Uh,
I hear that. I love that that's the new level of laziness we're all getting to, because I appreciate that when you can play you can play your content across multiple platforms. When I can play something on my PC at my desk or move it over to the couch and play it on my big screen in my living room,
yeah,
that convenience is great. I love doing that, and it's one of those things where I know anytime there's a new title out and I want to play some co-op with some friends of mine, I used to have to make the pitch of like, oh, it's totally worth the asking price. You should totally put up $39 for this game or that game. And sometimes that was an uphill battle, but now it's as easy to say as like, hey, this thing's on Game Pass, or this thing's on PlayStation Plus, or this just became free on Nintendo's platform. Let's give it a try. We have easy access to it. I think that just means people are gaming more. I mean, the ease of access is always going to make people play more games.
yeah. I think the big thing that I'm really happy about with this sort of movement is the sort of consolidated account crossplay trend that's been happening where you can play a game on PlayStation at a friend's house, that save files on your account, then you can go pick it up on your Xbox, load that file up, play it on an account. One of the games I'm totally like completely obsessed with right now is Path of Exile, which is on a whole bunch of platforms. It's totally free. The whole game is free. There's microtransactions, but nothing is required by any means. Um, but one of the things that I found really kind of aggravating and a little distasteful is I had loaded it up on my computer on my iMac, and I was going to play it on PC because I've been playing it on PlayStation, and none of my stash microtransactions carried over to PC. They're separate purchases. And I was like, I'm not going to play on PC. If I have to rebuy all of these things, so I really like save files being, cross platform, cross play, microtransactions, DLCs being cross platform, cross play. I think that is a trend that is really positive for our industry. So I'm happy to see that. And I guess we'll see what the future brings. We'll see. I still think Sony has got to respond in some way. They've got to respond to Games Pass. Definitely, I think, in my opinion, they have to respond in some way to, go buy an EA or Ubisoft, or someone mentioned Capcom. Capcom could be a fun buy. They're not as big as they were, but they still got some cool stuff. And then I was thinking about, before we got on here, I was like, what if Sony bought Konami? Konami's got a bunch of properties that they're not really doing a lot with. Silent Hills, for one. Metal Gear's obviously been intimately connected to PlayStation since the mid '90s. What if Sony bought Konami and started using their internal studios to revamp some of these old IPs? I think that could be kind of cool.
I mean, there's nothing stopping them, and it's one of those things where all of the studios that you mentioned are definitely ripe for that. But there's also plenty of others like Sega or Bandai Namco, uh, companies that have vast IP portfolios, tons of properties that maybe they haven't touched in 20 or 30 years that could be ripe for reboots. And I would be very excited as a gamer to see those things get made. But at the same time, I also don't want to see the industry devolve into just a Coke versus Pepsi, uh, this gang or that gang. I like the multiplicity of platforms. I like being able to play my content anywhere. To your point of that crossplay being advantageous. So I don't know. I think it's up to them. But I think that gamers are going to be voting with their wallets. So
Sure.
whatever the crew wants is what the crew's going to get.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that you have said. I just don't think that you can function in a competitive industry in which your opponent controls 70% of the content being created, you know? I just don't see how Sony will be able over the long run to keep that going when they're always beholden to whatever decision Microsoft wants to make, you know? Um, I could be
We'll
wrong.
see. It could be a pivot, it could be a switch. I mean, this is an innovative industry and a progressive one. So, for all
Pun
we
intended.
know, 5 years from now, we might see people playing Game Pass games on their PlayStation. Who knows? There are always hardware questions and software ones. The PS3 was technologically more advanced than the 360 with a built-in Blu-ray player and more controller ports and lots of other things, but initially was really outsold by the 360 because it was far more expensive and the 360 had a better online network. So
Yep.
maybe people are going to be buying more PS5s, not necessarily because they like the exclusives on it, but because it's a better piece of hardware or because uh, it has more multimedia applications in it than a rival piece of hardware. So who knows? I think this industry can be very hard to predict. As much as we were surprised by this new acquisition this week, we might be having a conversation 3 weeks from now about Sony buying Microsoft. Who knows? Anything could happen these days.
Yeah, I don't see that happening,
No.
um, but no, it is interesting if you just look at, we're getting close on time here. Um, but in general, if you just look at revenues generated through game sales, I posted it in another channel. It's like Tencent, a company nobody thinks about, is number one simply because they've been on a buying spree for the past 5 years,
Mhm.
followed by Sony, followed by Apple, which people don't think about either. Apple's currently the third. Sometimes they're the first, depending on how you look at the numbers, but we'll say third. Then Microsoft Xbox is below that. So Sony's still like they're doing gangbusters in terms of a revenue perspective. Um, so yeah, we will see, we will see. And I think my last thought on it is if this Activision Blizzard acquisition is gonna get me another Rock and Roll Racing, then I'm down. I'm down. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe Microsoft will pull that out of the gutter because that game is awesome. But
I think
any
it's all
last things?
potential. We might get more Guitar Hero out of this.
I
Anything's on the
totally.
table.
I would not be surprised if we see another Guitar Hero or some music equivalent game from them, without a doubt. Um, all right. Well, I think we can end it here. Any last things you want to say? Anything you want the audience to know? How can they reach you? Get a hold of you? Learn more about
Sure.
you?
So you can always find me at my website, loadinglaw.com, or on Twitter at loadinglaw. Those are always some of the easiest ways to get in touch with me. Uh, Keep reading some articles. Keep looking out there because this is a evolving issue. So there's always going to be some new things, and we'll just see what happens.
Awesome. Well, Ross, thank you for being the first guest on the Volpe Creates show. I really appreciate you being here. For those of you watching, you can follow me at Volpe Creates on the Twitters and Twitch TV or twitch.tv/Volpe Creates. I'm also reworking the website, so volpecreates.com. And if you are in the Midwest, or I guess if you're anywhere and you feel like making a trip, then you can come to beautiful Columbus, Ohio to check out GDEX, our expo. That's thegdex.com, which is happening this year, June 8th through the 12th. Um, Other than that, I appreciate everybody watching and commenting. I'm going to give baby girl here. Oh, there you go. Saying bye. And Ross, thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris, and best of luck with the new channel.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care.